You are stood in someone else's kitchen. You are 6 years old. The table has a paper cloth on it, white with balloons printed across it. The plates are paper, and the napkins have cartoon characters that are already 2 years out of date. There are 15 things on that table, and you can name most of them right now. But one of them, the one near the end, you have completely forgotten until this video. It is going to stop you in your tracks. Before we dive in, tap the subscribe button. You will not want to miss what is coming next. Between roughly 1965 and 1985, a children's birthday party in Britain was a kitchen table, a papercloth, and one woman's afternoon. No venue hire, no entertainer with a PA system, no party bags ordered from a website. The food came from the cupboard, the corner shop, and the oven. What replaced it was not better. It was more expensive, more convenient, and entirely forgettable. Today, you can spend £300 on a soft play party for 12 children, and not one of them will remember what they ate. The party table was a production. What follows is its inventory. The first one catches most people off guard because it was not a recipe. It was an engineering project, a grapefruit, sometimes half a cabbage, wrapped in kitchen foil. Cocktail sticks pushed in at every angle. On each stick, a cube of cheddar and a cube of tinned pineapple. Del Monte, or Libby's, drained over the sink. The cheese and pineapple, hedgehog. It had no proper name. Everyone knew what it was. The foil never sat flat. The sticks poked through the base and scratched the plate. It sat in the center of the table like a centerpiece at a state banquet. Every party, every Jubilee Street party and works do from Scarborough to Swansea. No one asked for one. It simply appeared, as if summoned by some unspoken social contract. Mothers competed silently over the density of the sticks. The hedgehog was architectural ambition expressed in dairy and fruit. You cannot buy a ready-made cheese and pineapple hedgehog. No one has manufactured one. It existed because women made it by hand in kitchens. When the women stopped making it, it ceased to exist. The hedgehog was the centerpiece. But the thing most mothers spent the most time on was the thing most children ignored completely. Shipham's paste sandwiches, small glass jar with a metal lid, chicken paste, salmon and shrimp, or beef. The company started in 1786 in Chichester, West Sussex. White sliced bread, crusts cut off, cut into triangles. Triangles meant a party. Squares meant Tuesday. The paste was spread thin. One jar did 30 or 40 sandwiches, a faint pink or beige smear, visible only if you lifted the bread. Stacked on a plate, covered in cling film until the doorbell rang. The sandwich plate was the first thing set down and the last thing touched. Children reached past it for everything else on the table. Mothers who had spent an hour cutting crusts watched their work ignored. In 1997, Shipham's was sold to Beta Foods. The glass jars are gone from the shelves. The sandwiches were labour-made invisible, and the labour has stopped. If the sandwiches were the foundation, the next one was the host mother's attempt at fine dining. It never quite worked. Everybody put them out anyway. Vol au vent. Jus roll frozen puff pastry case is the size of a 50p piece, filled with prawn cocktail, chicken in white sauce, or mushroom in something vaguely creamy from a tin. The pastry always collapsed when you picked it up. A tray of 12 looked elegant for approximately 90 seconds. Vol au vents were the host mother's declaration that this was not merely a children's party. This was an event. No child wanted one. Every child was told to try one. Juice Roll still sells the cases. Nobody fills them. The dinner party circuit that sustained them collapsed somewhere around 1989. The vol au vent was aspiration in pastry form. The aspiration moved on. Not everything on the table was trying to impress. Some of it was there for no reason anyone could explain. Twiglets. Small, dark brown, twig-shaped wheat sticks coated in yeast extract. Sharp, savoury, and entirely wrong for a child expecting sugar. Tipped into a bowl, never left in the box, and placed between the crisps and the biscuits where it belonged to neither world. No child asked for Twiglets. They were placed on the table by adults, for adults, as though the party belonged to them too. Every party had a bowl. Every bowl was still full at the end. Children who tried one made a face and put it back. Adults who arrived to collect their children ate the lot in the hallway. Some things survive not because they are loved, but because the people who buy them refuse to stop. Now here is something worth sitting with. What a children's party actually cost in 1975. Bread, paste, crisps, sausage rolls, fairy cakes, jelly, squash, paper plates, balloons, one past the parcel prize. Under £3 for 10 or 12 children. No venue, no entertainer, no party bags. One woman, one kitchen, one afternoon. Today, the average children's party in Britain costs over £300. The food was not catered, it was carried, and the labour was never counted because it was never paid. £3. That covered everything, including the cocktail sticks. Which brings us to the sausages, the sticks, and the argument that always followed. Cocktail sausages, chipolatas halved, or the small ones from Walls or Bowyer's. Sometimes wrapped in streaky bacon, pierced with cocktail sticks, the ones with the coloured cellophane frills on the end. Red, yellow, green. Cold or lukewarm, never hot. The sausage itself was secondary. The stick was the event. Boys used them as swords. Girls lined them up by colour. Someone always stood on one in bare feet. Someone always cried. The frilled cocktail stick was the party's true decoration. Cocktail sausages survive. The frilled sticks do not. The cellophane frill was a casualty of risk assessment. The party table lost its colour and nobody noticed. Some things at that table were eaten for the taste. Others were eaten for what you could do with them first. And nobody did more with a crisp than a child did with this one. Hula hoops, ring-shaped potato snacks, launched by KP in 1973. About 5p a bag. Small, crunchy, perfectly finger-sized. The ring shape was the entire point. You put them on your fingers, all 10. Then you ate them off, one by one. Every child did this. No child was taught to do it. It was instinctive, universal, and completely non-negotiable. No adult intervened. It was understood. Still made. Still the same shape. KP was sold to Intersnack, a German firm, in 2012. The ritual is older than the company that profits from it. Iced gems, tiny biscuit bases topped with a hard pointed blob of coloured icing. Made by Huntley and Palmer's, later Jacobs. The biscuit was barely there, a thin, pale disc the size of a thumbnail. The icing was the point. Pink, white, yellow, orange. The ritual was always the same. Bite the icing off, eat it, look at the naked biscuit, throw it away. The plate at a party was littered with tiny abandoned biscuit bases stripped of their colour, left like shells on a beach. Still made. The packet has shrunk. The price has not. The next one caused open conflict. You chose by colour, and colour at a children's party was currency. Fox's party rings. Flat, round shortcake biscuits with hard icing in violent colours. Pink, yellow, orange, white. Launched in 1983 by Fox's Biscuits of Batley, West Yorkshire. The icing cracked when you bit down. Nothing in nature looked like a party ring. Arguments broke out. Pink was currency. Orange was last resort. Some children licked the icing off and put the biscuit back on the plate. This was noticed. It was never forgiven. Fox's is now owned by Ferrero, the Italian multinational. A biscuit called Party Ring, born in Batley, belonging to a company headquartered in Alba, Piedmont. And this is worth pausing on. Fox's belongs to Ferrero in Italy. Jacobs belongs to Pladis, a Turkish holding company. KP was sold to Intersnack in Germany. Huntley and Palmer's closed the Reading factory in 1972. Peak Friens closed the Bermondsey factory the same year. The biscuits survived. The British companies that made them did not. The party table was assembled from British brands. Almost none of them are British any longer. Pink wafers. 3 layers of pale pink wafer with cream between. Dry, crumbly, faintly sweet. Dissolved on the tongue rather than being chewed. The crumbs got everywhere. On the tablecloth, on the carpet, in the folds of the settee. Pink wafers were never the first thing you reached for, and never the last thing standing. They occupied the middle ground of the party. Eaten without enthusiasm, missed without explanation if absent. The wallflower of the spread, still made, still pink, still the biscuit nobody asks for and everybody eats. Pink wafers required nothing from you. The next one demanded all 3. No mixing, no waiting, no argument. And every child in Britain knew the rule about the whisk. Angel Delight, instant dessert powder by Birds, released in 1967. Flavors included butterscotch, strawberry, chocolate, and banana. The butterscotch was the correct flavor. This is not a matter of debate. A foil sachet inside a cardboard box, half a pint of cold milk, whisked with a hand whisk or a fork for as long as you could be bothered, then set in the fridge for an hour. It cost about 15 pence a packet. Every party, every household. The bowl was passed around and children spooned it directly. The argument over who licked the whisk was settled by whoever's house it was. Angel Delight was the great democratizer of the children's party. Rich house, poor house, the sachet cost the same and tasted the same. It is still made. The brand belongs to Premier Foods now. The butterscotch has been reformulated. It does not taste the same. The people who remember the original know this. Premier Foods knows they know. Angel Delight came from a packet and made no apology for it. So did the next one. But this one pretended otherwise, and the man on the box never existed. Mr. Kipling Fondant Fancies. Small square sponge cakes coated in smooth fondant icing. Pink, yellow, chocolate. They came in a box of 8 on a white plastic tray. The pink ones were taken first. The yellow ones survived longest, untouched and faintly reproachful. There was no Mr. Kipling. He was invented in 1967 by the marketing department at Rank Hovis McDougall. The cakes were factory-made in Barnsley, South Yorkshire. The fiction of a kindly country baker was more powerful than the truth. The recipe has been changed at least twice. The fondant is thinner. The sponge is drier. The box still says exceedingly good. The box is the only one still making that claim. Mr. Kipling's cakes came from a factory. The next one came from a kitchen. One kitchen, one woman, one recipe book, and almost every family in the country owned the same copy. Fairy cakes. Small sponge cakes baked in paper cases, topped with water icing and hundreds and thousands, or a glaced cherry, or a butterfly wing cut from the top and stuck back in with buttercream, made from the B. Rowe recipe book. 4 ounces of everything: self-raising flour, caster sugar, margarine, and 1 egg. 12 minutes at gas mark 5. Iced with icing sugar and water tinted pink with cochineal. Hundreds and thousands pressed into the wet icing before it set. These were the only item on the table made in the house, by hand, that morning. Everything else came from a packet, a tin, or the freezer. The fairy cakes were proof of effort. Proof that someone had stood in the kitchen and measured and mixed and waited. The B. Rowe book was first published in 1923 and was given away free with bags of flour. Over 40 million copies sold. Every recipe worked. Every measurement was in ounces. It sat in the kitchen drawer, spine cracked, pages stiff with dried batter. The woman who used it never called herself a cook. She was just making the cakes for Saturday. Cupcakes replaced them. The fairy cake was small, flat, and modest. The cupcake cost £3.50 from a shop on the high street that will be closed by next year. The fairy cake was made by your mother. The cupcake is made by a brand. Fairy cakes took effort. The next two required almost none. One wobbled. One was sliced with ceremony. Blancmange, a packet dessert by birds, a powder dissolved in hot milk, poured into a mold and set overnight in the fridge. Bright pink or pale yellow, turned out of a rabbit-shaped aluminium mold bought in Woolworths. The wobble continued for several seconds after it hit the plate. Nobody loved blancmange. It was simply expected. It occupied the same cultural space as net curtains, present in every household, chosen by nobody. At parties, it sat next to the jelly and was always the last dessert standing. Children took a spoonful out of politeness and left the rest to solidify. The rabbit mold is in the charity shop between the fondue set and the hostess trolley. The wobble has stopped because nobody is there to see it. Blancmange wobbled. The next one arrived frozen solid, and it was cut with a bread knife by a woman who treated the moment like surgery. Arctic roll, bird's eye. A cylinder of vanilla ice cream wrapped in a thin layer of sponge cake with a line of raspberry sauce between the two. Invented in the 1950s by Ernest Velden, a Czech immigrant who set up a factory in Eastbourne. About 45 pence by the mid-'70s. The sponge was pale and thin. The ice cream was dense and sweet. The raspberry line was barely visible, but always there. It was the formal dessert of the children's party. It was cut by the host mother with a bread knife, with ceremony, as if slicing something far more significant. Children queued with paper plates. The end pieces, all sponge and no ice cream, went to the child whose mother was watching. Production stopped in 1997. It was revived in 2008 during the recession because people wanted comfort more than novelty. It was cold and sweet, and someone's mum cut it for you. That was enough. Arctic roll came from the freezer, but the thing that mattered most, the thing that meant the party was real, did not come from the freezer. It came from the fridge, and it wobbled. Jelly. Roundtrees. A solid block of translucent colour scored into cubes. Strawberry, raspberry, orange, lime, blackcurrant, dissolved in boiling water, topped up with cold water, poured into a mould and set overnight. The colour, the clarity, the wobble. Served in a bowl with a scoop of vanilla ice cream from the block, walls or lions made, cut with a knife. The ice cream melted into the jelly, and the bowl became a slow pool of pink and white. About 8 pence a tablet in the early 70s. The mould was rinsed in hot water and turned out onto the plate with the same held breath as diffusing a bomb. Jelly and ice cream was the point of the party, not the pass the parcel, not the musical chairs, not the going home bag with a slice of cake and a napkin. The moment the jelly appeared was the moment the room changed. It was colour and sugar and ceremony. It was the thing you remembered at 60 when someone said the words birthday party. Every child in the room went quiet for exactly 1 second. Then the noise began again. Jelly is still sold. The blocks are smaller. The ice cream is different. Jelly and ice cream is no longer the climax of anything. It is a mid-week pudding for a toddler. It used to be the centerpiece of the only day in a child's year that was entirely about them. The bowl was pink and white, and it meant everything. Subscribe to the channel and watch the next video to keep these stories alive.